I will now take leaders' questions under Standing Order 27, and I call Deputy Colm Keaveney.
Thank you, Laskin Corla. Taoiseach, scoliosis is a condition that affects several hundred children and adolescents in Ireland. It's a progressive disease and it affects the curvature of the spine. It's progressive, it causes increasing difficulty with breathing, it impacts on the internal organs such as the heart. And as you can imagine, Taoiseach, its impact on the child, particularly children who are both sensitive with respect to their appearances, a child travelling through a life of school, it's a very sensitive situation. It impacts on their condition, their mental health, and their daily getting about the place. Taoiseach, this case was forcibly brought to my attention by a young woman, a girl called Sophie, 15 years old, from Galway. She once led a cheerful, confident, outgoing life. She had an excellent attendance in school. She was once a grade A student. Taoiseach, in February 2014, she was diagnosed with scoliosis. And by the summer of 2014, her condition had deteriorated. Urgent surgery was recommended. In preparation for the necessary surgery, she went through many tests and many scans. But after Taoiseach, the tests and the scans, Sophie's mother, or Sophie, have not heard a word from the HSE. She has been left in limbo since. Now, all too often, Taoiseach, this has been the experience of many families who suffer or carry the burden of scoliosis. And the HSE and the Minister only seem to act when people in the media, such as Fergal Blaney, the Daily Mail, contact the HSE and ask about cases with respect to scoliosis. With the delay of almost 2 years, Taoiseach, it's now impacting on her internal organs. She presented herself to the GP yesterday, where her curvature, now at 80 degrees at an angle, is impacting and puncturing her lung. Worse still has been the impact on her mental health. She's no longer able to attend school. Sophie is now on antidepressants as a consequence of waiting 2 years for an intervention. Now, Taoiseach, to add insult to injury, Sophie, a child, received a personal letter last week from the HSE telling her that they were sending her to Barrington Hospital in Limerick. Her family celebrated and they were relieved. When they rang the HSE this week, the HSE advised them that the letter was sent in error.
Thank you, Deputy.
Taoiseach, are you happy with the treatment that children like Sophie, hundreds of other adolescents who are languishing on waiting lists, and how they're being treated by your government and the HSE?
Well, first of all, I think anybody who has experienced this particular disease or has family members or friends or knows people who suffers from it, it is a very difficult condition. It is one which is obviously as well impacted on by the fact that you're talking about it affecting growing children. Just let me say that in relation to the particular case that you highlight, I am obviously not familiar with the details. I'll ask the Minister for Health to ask for a report from the HSE on the subject, and I apologise for any error that was made by the HSE. I do hope they will have apologised for it as well, and I hope it hasn't impacted too severely on Sophie and her family. In a general sense, though, scoliosis, as people who are familiar with the disease may know, has been the object of a very significant expansion of resources in our health system. And I think it's important that we acknowledge that provisioning in relation to the number of cases being treated has pretty much doubled during the period of the lifetime of this government, so that treatment is now available, as you said, in a variety of different locations, specifically in terms of increasing capacity in Blackrock, in Kappa, which is a dedicated orthopaedic hospital, and in Temple Street. As we speak, there is a new theatre in Crumlin which is underway, and which will also provide additional resources in relation to this very difficult condition. Specifically in respect of Galway, there have been 2 additional orthopaedic consultants appointed in respect of Galway. So we actually have a situation where this particular disease, which I think has a stronger presence in Ireland than in many other countries, has actually received a significant amount, the doubling of resources and the increase in the numbers of locations at which patients are being treated. As I said, in Blackrock, in Temple Street and in Crumlin. We're also now referring a number of cases to the Stanmore in London, again as a mechanism to deal as quickly as possible with the cases on the list, and to deal in particular with cases which present great complexity and which very often refer to a patient who may have one or more conditions besides the scoliosis. And obviously, as medical technology develops, the capacity to deal with those more complex cases is improving. So I just want to assure you that in terms of the HSE, in terms of the Minister for Health and the Department of Health, very significant additional resources are actually being allocated and treatment is being provided at a number of locations across the country, and for the first time ever in London also. So I would hope that for families or for individuals who are suffering from the condition, that they would understand that we intend to provide a greatly expanded and enhanced level of treatment. We're doing that already, doubling the resources and providing it in some of the absolutely premier institutions in Ireland in respect to orthopaedic treatment.
Supplementary question from Deputy Colm Keaveney.
I'd like to acknowledge the Taoiseach's response, but Taoiseach, the waiting list for children with scoliosis is increasing. The time that children are waiting is increasing because teenagers with scoliosis are waiting up to 3 years for an early intervention. Taoiseach, can I read a quote from Dr. David Moore? He's a consultant, paediatric consultant. He is quoted in saying that operating on a child that has been subject to an unnecessary delay after diagnosis is dealing with a very profound situation, because research shows that when a child has delayed surgery and is dealing with a curvature of greater than 70%, will be subject to longer surgery, greater blood loss, more fused vertebrae, and double the blood transfusion that's required. So the issue here, Taoiseach, is early intervention. Taoiseach, the waiting lists in Crumlin orthopaedics have increased significantly since March. I'm asking that you would roll up your sleeve and give some level of hope for families who have been languishing on waiting lists, children who are suffering in pain. I'm asking that you would take particular interest with the Minister to ensure that he rolls up his sleeves. He's one of the highest paid ministers of health in Europe, and we're asking for action for children who are languishing on waiting lists in pain. Early intervention. After the age of 16, there is little or no point in intervening, because the likely outcome of a successful operation to ensure that that curvature can be addressed will fail. So after diagnosis, what is required is investment. And what we don't see is the proper urgency, the political will on behalf of the government. Look at the waiting lists in Crumlin. They've increased since March. Now, I acknowledge that at a very late stage you're attempting to do something, but that's only because you're exposed.
Thank you, Deputy. Minister Taoiseach.
Well, first of all, in relation Sorry, in relation to your references to Dr Moore, I think Dr Moore is known to families right around Ireland, and I'm sure to many members of this House, as being one of our most outstanding doctors and surgeons. And let me assure you that anything that would be said by David Moore would be taken very seriously by me personally, because I'm aware of his personal reputation and his commitment to children down the decades, and of the family who have a very strong involvement in medical matters and a long history of that in this country. Just let me say, I referenced to you that there is an additional theatre being built in Crumlin. Just to say that the Minister for Health has met Dr Moore, or Professor Moore, on several occasions, and that one of the requests and proposals from Dr Moore was to have additional theatre space. That's under construction at the moment, and I anticipate that that will be finished and available shortly. In addition, in order to actually reduce the waiting list, there's been a very specific examination done in terms of how you reference Dr Moore's work to look at the different issues which face different children. Some of them are more straightforward, some of them are more complex. And in order to help with that, the Stanmore Clinic in London, which is again a renowned location, has actually been commissioned to do some work in conjunction with the hospitals here. So in terms of, for instance, of the Temple Street Clinic, which had 15 patients, the Royal National Hospital, the Orthopaedic Hospital, which is at Stanmore in London. The clinic in Temple Street had 15 patients. Stanmore has accepted 11 of those, 5 of whom are people who are waiting for a long time. 2 of the families have decided not to progress with surgery on the basis of second opinions, while 2 will be followed up with outpatient appointments in Crumlin.
Thank you,
so the long waiters are actually, in fairness to the HSE and to the hospitals involved, who have a tremendous record of service to children, the staff, the nurses, the medical consultants. I think anybody who's familiar with scoliosis will know how difficult it is to deal with and to get it right. Because when you have orthopaedic operations, you have to have a high level of outcome of success. Now, that doesn't refer to the situation of Sophie, which you said was arising from a cancellation. But just to assure you that between resourcing the HSE and resourcing the individual hospitals and the individual departments dealing with these issues, there is actually a concerted effort underway to actually deal particularly with children and young teenagers who have been waiting a long time, because, as you said, it does affect their whole lives.